Welcome, everyone, to this very special event at Massey Hall. I'm Mattea Roach, the host of Bookends on CBC. Our guest tonight, though, is who you're here to see. She is the brilliant mind behind Chief Inspector Armand Gamache, and, of course, The Village of Three Pines, a fictional place that is so real, readers show up in rural Quebec actually asking for directions. Her books are #1 bestsellers, translated around the world. They've been devoured, reread, and passed along from friends and family members to friends and family members with the instruction, you have to read this right now. She's been a journalist, a broadcaster, and is now one of the most widely read mystery writers on the planet. 20 novels in, she's built a series and a universe, one built on murder and the macabre, but also decency, courage, and community. Please, everyone, join me in giving a warm welcome to tonight's guest of honor, Louise Penny.
Oh, wow. That was beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, what a wonderful feeling. Thank you. All right, well, I'm leaving.
Yeah, that's all we get.
I'm out of here.
Great applause, raucous applause, and that's all you get to see, folks. No. Louise, thank you.
Well, thank you for being here, and thank everybody. It's cold. You could be at home. You could be all snuggled in. So thank you.
No, thank you for making the journey to Toronto. I wish we had better weather to greet you. And
well, I came from the Eastern Township.
Fair,
so.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Perhaps this is an improvement. So for folks in the room who might be newer to Louise's series, since the publication of Still Life back in 2005, 20 years ago, you've chronicled the life. How does that feel, 20 years?
20 years. I look at photographs. I've got a wonderful photograph here in Toronto when we used to have this book fair that wasn't open to the public. It was for publishers and booksellers. And so I went, and the book hadn't come out yet, Still Life. So the publisher had me sitting there. I have a picture of me, I don't have a pen here, but holding a pen up here because I had nothing to do, right? So I have that photo, I love it. Michael was there too, and there was the picture of the cover of Still Life behind me, and I had brown hair.
Yeah, that tells you something. That wasn't yesterday. Well, 20 years on, your newest novels, The Grey Wolf and The Black Wolf, form this powerful two-part story. In The Grey Wolf, we see Gamache and his team working to stop this terror plot. The Black Wolf, this is going to be a generally spoiler-free event, but it picks up in the aftermath just a few weeks later. Gamache is recovering and realizes this foiled attack was just a prelude to something deeper and darker. Politics, deeper and darker, more dangerous even than what's going on in The Grey Wolf. And suddenly there's bigger questions than just who might have committed a crime. Also questions about Canada itself, about our resources, our neighbor, the international relationships between us and our neighbor, and some of
all fiction.
Nothing anyone's worried about at all. Foundational myths of security. I don't know, I see the news in the CBC elevator at work all the time. I'm learning a lot about foundational myths of security when I'm in the elevator. That's where I want to start. Before anyone, had even read The Black Wolf, there was already a bit of a story brewing about the publication, about your tour. It's the first time in 20 years you've chosen to not tour in the United States after releasing a novel. With the exception of this one stop at the Haskell Free Library and Opera House on the border between Quebec and Vermont.
But I sat in the Canadian side.
Critical distinction. I want to just ask what your thought process was in deciding how you were going to tour with this book, how you were going to approach maybe even that event in particular.
Well, the Haskell was an obvious choice. How many here, because the book came out a few weeks ago, how many here have actually read the book already? And how much did you love it? It's so fragile. So again, no spoilers, but the Haskell actually does play a role in the book itself, and then obviously it became symbolic in a larger sense, in the macro sense of the politics that are happening now, because the Trump administration decided to not allow Canadians into the Haskell because the main door was on the American side. So the Canadian, because this is a library that's an opera house that's right on the border, and the border line is painted right through the middle of the thing, the Canadian side, in such an elegant solution, I was so proud of them, said, well, F you, we'll just put a hole in the wall and do our own wall, our own door. And how symbolic are doors? We opened our own door. How wonderful is that? So the Haskell became the obvious choice to essentially end that part of the tour as a symbol, also because it plays a role in the novel, and also because I couldn't tour and chose not to. I mean, I could have, but I chose not to tour in the U.S. But this would allow Americans to come and see an event that I was doing. So they sat on the American side and we sat on the Canadian side. So we did 2 events there with 200 Americans and 200 Canadians. And I think, you know, how dare anyone think that they can break that relationship asunder? They can't, and they won't. And that's what the Haskell was about and what those relationships are about.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's beautiful hearing you speak about that relationship. That's something that's so historic, that's obviously in a very tense moment right now, but it's not just a government-to-government relationship, it is a person-to-person relationship, right?
Yeah.
Just talking a bit more broadly about how the actual plot of this novel slots into some of these wider political discussions that are going on right now, particularly the idea of the 51st state and Canadian resources being something that certain Americans think they have a right to. How do you see this novel slotting into those discussions that are happening right now?
It's really hard to talk about it without spoiling anything. My broad strokes approach to this novel and to where we are in the world is that the nations that are resource rich, like Canada, that have oil, that have timber, that have water, that have all the other resources that at one stage we were mocked for as the hewers of wood and the drawers of water, we are now quickly become the apex nations. We're the ones with all, and then the UN has, I'm not making any of this up, the UN has issued warnings that civil wars are breaking out over resources. And if you start extrapolating that and saying, this is where we are, powerful nation to the south is running out of these resources, we have resources, what would you do if your neighbor had a lot and you had nothing? You'd probably knock on the door and ask politely, could we have a cup of water, please? And the neighbor would probably say yes, but if 100 million came knocking on the door and wanted more than a cup of water.
Yeah. I mean, this is a book that is quite prescient in a lot of ways. Obviously, at the time that you would have been writing it and submitting edits and things, the political situation, I think, evolved probably quite drastically during that time.
Yes.
But
because I thought when I was writing this that I had gone too far.
Really? Okay. And then
I thought, nobody's going to believe this. And what have I done? I've jumped the shark. This is it. This is it.
Yeah. But I mean, a lot of your novels, I think, have engaged with various sort of social, political issues in different ways. And I'm curious for you in your writing process, what do you glean from things that are going on in the real world versus what is a product of your imagination where you maybe do wonder, have I jumped the shark here and taken things a bit far?
I laugh about jumping the shark because in the 20th book, where I'm essentially setting it in the same setting of Three Pines with pretty much the same core group of characters, the trick is not to write the same book over and over again, not to become formulaic. And I know that a lot of readers really would prefer that I wrote every book and kept it in 3 Pines. But the fact is that the series would be dead by now if I did that. I have to stretch as a writer. I have to put the characters in different situations. I have to challenge them with different ethical and moral issues as well. And that's what this book was about, was trying to push the limit.
Mm-hmm. For the folks, I have a couple of family members here tonight, and they're mega fans of you, as we were saying before. And the thing that seems to excite them the most, if I can speak on their behalf about your writing, is that there's a sort of emotional core and takeaway, that there are things that are interesting about it beyond just the whodunit or howdunit of the crimes. I want to go back to the moment in this novel before everything kind of starts to unravel at the very beginning, because we meet Gamache. He's dealing with the aftermath of the events of the Grey Wolf. Specifically, he has this hearing loss tinnitus problem that he's really struggling with, and he's somebody that in his line of work is very reliant on all of his senses. His hearing has been a strong point historically, and he's now kind of struggling with how to adapt to this new state that he's in. What was it like for you writing this detective who now one of his biggest attributes as a sleuth has been really reduced?
That's an interesting question, and I'm going to be very honest with you. One of the things I wanted to make sure I did was have it improve. His hearing improves, because it's not a permanent loss. And I wanted him as well to use it where a weakness becomes a strength, so that others think that he can't hear as well as he can, although he still has this challenge. I don't have hearing loss. I have some people in my family, one person in particular who has. Michael did as well. He had hearing aids, but not complete hearing loss. And so I really had to think about what it would be like. And it was either at the beginning of this book or at the end of The Grey Wolf, where whatever happened to create this. One of the most difficult scenes I've written was when he is thinking about how lonely it is to be deaf. That he misses the little things, like just the easy conversations, the hearing Ren-Marie sneeze. It's not missing music, absolutely missing all the big things, but having the scaring the grandchildren because he doesn't understand what they're saying anymore, and he talks too loudly to them, and he can see the fear in their face. Why is their grandfather's yelling at them? He doesn't even know he's doing that. So that was very painful for me to write.
Yeah, I mean, can you expand on that, I guess? Like, painful, I guess, just to imagine what that would be like and kind of think about.
Yeah, imagining it, and also because I've come to care about these characters. In French, they're called personnages, which I think is more accurate, at least in this case. I don't think of them as characters. I think of them as people. And I've carried them with me for 20 years, and I owe them protection. And I don't mean physical protection, because things have to happen in their fictional lives, but I need to be respectful of them as a whole and not have them do things that are out of character. And so when it's necessary to show them vulnerable or hurt, whether it is a physical trauma or a moral trauma, then it is painful, because you need to feel it. I think one of the great things for me, one of the great comforts for me, is that I hope that as a writer I get better, just because as a human being I experience more things. Mm-hmm. There's a line from Auden's poem to Yeats, his elegy to Yeats, that has inspired a lot of the books, and he wrote, "Mad Ireland hurt him into poetry." Isn't that brilliant? Mad Ireland hurt him into poetry. What is that, 6, 7 words? And in that sentence, you know everything you need to know about Ireland, about poetry, and about Yeats. How genius is that? But I think that that was often the case for me, too, that I had to be hurt into being able to write these characters. Hurt, but also know enough about love, just know enough about life to create these characters.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, you've spent 20 years plus with these characters at this point, and you first introduced us to Inspector Gamache back in your debut Still Life in 2005. What was his origin story at that time? Like, where did he come from? What was going on for you that made you say, this is the guy that I want to focus on in my writing?
Well, every decision I made was selfish. Because I didn't think the book was going to be published. I wanted it to be published, obviously, but I knew what are the chances. So many books that are started are never finished, and so many books that are finished aren't fortunate enough to find a publisher. So I was pretty sure that the writing of it would be all the reward I was going to get. And so as I said, every decision was selfish. I created a village I would choose to live in. I populated it with characters I would want to hang around with. And then it came time to create the main character. And I remember hearing that whether this is true or not, it's one of these sort of literary myths, that Agatha Christie grew weary of Poirot. Did you hear about that? Did you hear that? And I don't know whether it's true or not, but I didn't want that to happen with my main character. And so I sort of thought about it for a while, but what happened there? And I think one of the issues was that Poirot never evolved. If you read The Mysterious Affair at Styles, just a brilliant book, it was her first novel, and then you read books that were written in the 1960s, he essentially hasn't changed. He never gets married, he never has a romance, he never has close friends, he never gets sick. Well, he gets a little cold every now and then. But I couldn't consider that a big evolution, getting a cold. So I wanted to make sure I created a character who would evolve. And for me, it was fun to create, too. I wanted to create a character in midlife who clearly had a history. It's like joining a conversation halfway through. And so you're curious about what happened before, as well as what's going to happen in the future.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting, we're talking about the idea of beginning with a character who's in midlife, who's had some experiences, and that informs, a lot of what goes on in their later character development. You also, I think, have kind of an interesting career as a writer in that you had an entire other decently long career as a journalist before you ever became a novelist. Mm-hmm. Why did you choose to make that change at the time you did?
I worked at CBC.
Indeed. And how was that? You had to flee after 20 years? Like, how long do I have?
Well, it was kind of a natural progression to go from CBC to murder. So just be warned. Mm-hmm. This is in your future.
We'll check back in the 17, 18 years how I'm doing.
I'll be dead.
Yeah.
I'd wanted to write since the age of 8. But I was 8, so, what are you going to do? And I was just fearful. I was afraid of failure. I was afraid that the only thing I ever really wanted to do was read in my bedroom. It's still the only place I ever want to be, my bedroom. Michael used to call me a horizontalist. It's so true. That's all I want to do is put my feet up and be reading. I imagine that's probably true for those of you who are here too, right? Which makes it even better that you came out tonight when you could be at home with your feet up. That's what I wanted to do. I was afraid of failing. Fear has been quite a tyrant in my life. I'm not sure how much of it is a fear of failure or a fear of judgment of others. But it has stopped me for many years from doing what I really wanted to do. And then a couple of things happened. I was covering the Quebec referendum, the second one, in the 90s, the late 90s or mid-90s. And most of you here remember what happened. It was so close, so close. And I was on air, live on air that night, and we were told privately by someone in the No campaign, which was the Federalist campaign, that the yes, the sovereignists, were going to win. And so we were prepared for that. And as it turns out, the Federalist won, as you know, but it was so close. It was so close. It was shattering. Everybody felt broken by it and wounded and hurt. And I was tired. I was tired, and I was becoming the sort of colleague I wouldn't want to work with. So and I had to live with myself. So I came home one day, and Michael said, if you want to quit work and write that book that you've always wanted to write, the most beautiful thing, it was right up there with when he first said, I love you. He said, I'll support you.
Wow.
Isn't that beautiful? I'll support you. And he meant it. Thank God he meant financially.
Yeah.
So I quit work. I am only slightly embarrassed to admit that Canadian politics brought me to my knees, but it did. And so yeah, that's how it started. He gave me. I suffered 5 years of writer's block because fear, of course, still was the hound, and then I realized that I had to not worry about writing a book for anyone else, and just write a book I would read. That's it. And that's why every decision I made was selfish. And I ended up, you asked earlier about Gamache, I created a character who I knew could evolve and would evolve, and a character who I would find endlessly fascinating, and a character I would marry, and turned out I did.
Oh. I mean, you've told us already quite a lot about Michael, your late husband, and just the love that you guys shared, is the way you talk about it even now is really moving. Tell me a bit more about what he's like. I love hearing stories about people that are clearly so important, so formative, and to just give you the opportunity to share a bit about him.
Yeah, he was a special guy. I have my nephew and nephews and sister-in-law here who knew him very well, and some other people, I'm sure, who also knew Michael. He was the head of hematology at the Montreal Children's Hospital. So he was the doctor you never want to have to meet, because it meant something dreadful was happening to your child. And I remember the Christmases together when we were in Montreal, and he was still working, and he would go in, because he actually looked quite a bit like Santa Claus. So he'd go in all dressed up as Santa Claus, and I would go in as Mrs. Claus, and he would give out the gifts, and ho, ho, ho. And the first Christmas that we were together, and there was a Christmas party at the Montreal Children's, and the kids were in the middle, and they had their toys, and they were playing, and the parents were there, and I was chatting with them. And I looked across the room, and there was Michael watching, and then he very slowly turned around and faced the wall. So it was pretty clear that his nose was touching the wall, and I'm thinking, that's strange. So I went around to him and said, "Are you okay? What is this?" And he turned around and he was crying. And he said that he knew, he was the only one there who knew which children would see another Christmas. And he was crying. So what his job was brutal. And he would sit with the children through the night and beyond. And he had to say things to young parents no young parent should ever have to hear. But he was also the happiest person I've ever met, because he knew what a gift life was, and what a betrayal it would be of those young people who do not get to live it, if those of us who do get to live it don't live it with gratitude, with courage, with the awareness of how lucky we are, with decency. And that's what Gamache has, and that's who Michael was.
Yeah. That's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's really very beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you. That's for Michael. Thank you.
And I mean,
how lucky was I to have that?
What a gift, I mean, to be loved and to be supported and encouraged during a time where you were grappling with a lot of fear about what you were going to do, about the risk of leaving a job.
And he always believed in me, although it did get to the stage where when I was like 5 years into writer's block, and now he's still supporting me, right? And he would come home and he'd stopped asking me how the book was going because he was afraid. It was a little bit like my mother when I reached 35, 36 and wasn't married yet, and she stopped asking. Have you met any nice men? Any women?
Anybody, anyone
any
at
farm
all?
Animals? Really, just anything. Do you have a dog you like?
Yeah. Any house plants that are growing really nicely lately?
Exactly. Yeah. So it was similar.
Yeah, I mean, it's good, I think, to have people that are supportive, that give you the push you need, that also sometimes know when to stop asking if things are not going so well.
Do you know the other thing that he did, and you interview authors all the time, so I think we all have different approaches to this, but he was so supportive, he was not my biggest critic. I'm in awe of people who marry and want to marry their biggest critic. I do not. There are people who are paid to do that. I don't need to be married to that. So I would give him whatever I had written, and he'd read it. Oh my God, this is brilliant. And I'd know it wasn't. It was a piece of merde. I know that. And he probably knew that. But he didn't care.
But that's maybe he knew, like, sometimes that's what you need to hear. I'm the opposite. I'm like, I want my criticism for free and in my home.
I want my criticism for free.
And at home. No, I edit,
Do you really?
Well, I edit a lot of papers for friends, friends of mine that are academics or doing grad school statements.
Yeah.
I'll edit.
And they expect
honest, because the stakes are really high at that case, right? That's a lot of trust. But it's serving a different purpose, right? Like, that's a different purpose than that kind of encouragement that you're talking about, of just that next push to keep going.
That's it, the confidence that it's okay, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. When I write, I have a poster in front of me that is the last words of the poet Seamus Heaney, who, and I'm sure you know this, that on his deathbed said to his wife, "Noli timere," which means be not afraid. And so when I write, and especially with the 20th book and the books leading up to it, to just keep risking, keep pushing, keep taking chances, be not afraid. And that's what Michael, when he was saying, this is brilliant, that's what he was saying to me, is don't be afraid. It's okay, you can do it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think you've kind of already partly answered the next question I was going to ask, but this one's from the audience, so I will call it out anyhow. We have a Shannon Smith who's here tonight with a friend who just left a, quote, very successful and powerful career, which had us at work actually guessing, what career? Were you a lawyer? Can you tell me how to be one finally, maybe? To become a writer. Do you have any advice for someone who's taking that leap of leaving a more traditional, perhaps stable professional life to pursue a passion like writing?
All I can tell you is it is a great job and good for you. I just have such awe for people who take that chance and decide to not reach the end of your life regretting not having taken that risk. So good for you. I'm serious about that. What finally for me, because I did suffer the 5 years of writer's block, what finally broke it for me were a number of things, all of which are relatively small. I got in with a group of very creative women, some of whom were writers, some were dancers, some were poets, some were painters, singers, and we would meet once every couple of weeks, and we called ourselves Les Girls. And we would talk about the process. And that was incredibly supportive. And I saw that it was a process, that you're not going to get it right the first time. You just have to keep at it and keep at it and have that support group around you. And I learned to be very careful about who I did talk to about my work, because you're vulnerable. The other thing that happened, and this was with the second book, because the first book took me 45 years to write. And then my agent, who was British, and I don't know if anyone else has this same experience, but when I hear someone speak with a British accent, there is an implied, "you idiot."
A lot of them are kind of dry sometimes in how they speak. Not across the board.
That's very kind of you to say.
But I have known, some people where it's kind of, they may not mean to speak that way, but it's just a tonal thing for some people, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll call it that.
Yeah, they don't feel at all superior to colonials.
Well,
You're right.
But yeah, your agent was...
My agent was British, so that didn't help.
No, was it perhaps like a TikTok second book, what's going on type of situation?
Well, no, what she did was she phoned me up and said, I've sold 3 books.
Oh.
And I said, that's great. Mine and who else's? And she said, they're all yours, you idiot. And so then I had to write the second book, and I didn't know, because I thought the first book was magic. I didn't know how I managed to do it. And now I have to write a second book. And so I went to a therapist because I was very worried. I'm a big fan of asking for help. And I went to a therapist because I was halfway through the second book, and it was good, but it wasn't great. It wasn't worth your time. And I knew I was being handed everything I've ever wanted, and I was failing. And so I went to the therapist to ask for help. And what she said changed my life, and I hope, Shannon, this might help you. She said, the wrong person is writing the book, which was not initially helpful. So I said, what do you mean? And she said, your critic is writing the book. I know, it was, she said, you need to thank the critic, you need to bless the critic, you need to show the critic the door. But don't lock the door, because you're going to need her later for the second and third drafts. But with the first draft, you need to write with joy. You need to write with freedom. You need to take all the chances. If you write 10 pages on a glass of water, just do it. It's not going to end up in the second draft. That's what the critic is for. But in the first draft, do it, because you might find a sentence or two in there that you can use. Just give yourself permission to be wrong, to take chances, to jump off the cliff. Just write. Write with awareness of how lucky you are that you get to do it. And that was life-changing for me, because I realized I don't have to get it right the first time. None of us have to get any of this right the first time.
That's so interesting, because I very much, I think, go to this Alistair MacLeod school of writing, where Alistair MacLeod, the great Nova Scotian novelist and short story writer, he had this thing where he would apparently only write one sentence at a time. And the one sentence would have to be perfect before he would move on to the next sentence.
Good Lord.
Which is the complete opposite of what you're talking about.
Yes.
And for him, evidently, it worked. His work was amazing. But I think that's really unusual. And I think for far more authors, whether you're a professional working novelist, whether you're a short story writer, journalist, or someone who writes just for pleasure, I think what you're describing is usually more common.
There is no one right way of doing it. We all have different ways. I realized that the other thing that my agent did at one stage, she phoned up halfway through the second draft, and she said, now, how's it going? And I said, oh, it's going really bad. I'm really nervous. And she said, oh, for God's sake, it's not War and Peace you're writing.
Yeah, that's that dry British humor.
This was the frying pan in the face. But what she said was, she said, okay, now the thing is, here it is, that most writers most books are 90,000 words. Not necessarily true, but all right, so that's a goalpost. Most writers can write 1,000 words a day. 3 months, you got a book written. Now, you know, she's sitting at home just bringing in the royalties. What does she know? But what it did was it showed me that there is a process. That I could choose to write 1,000, I could choose to write 50, I could choose to write one sentence at a time, but there is a way to do it. So that's all I do. And to this day, that's all I do.
You know, I want to ask about some of your own reading habits, because you mentioned earlier, you know, being an avid reader as a young person through your whole life and wanting first and foremost, even maybe before wanting to be a writer, to just be able to read. What were your early years as a reader like? Like, what really got you excited as a young person and made you think, this is going to be a big part of my life?
I was such a voracious reader, because I was, and still am, an introvert. I loved being alone in my room, as I've said before, reading. And I would read Apples Every Day was one, The White Oaks of Jalna. Yeah, I know. All of these, all the ones where, the Littlest Princess, The Secret Garden. I know, weren't they great? Charlotte's Web was really the first one that I really clicked into the difference between fiction and reality. And I've told this story before, but I was just such a fearful child. And one of my main fears was spiders. And in reading Charlotte's Web, and loving Charlotte and not wanting anything bad to happen to Charlotte, I had this huge fear. There was, I suspect, a phobia lifted. And I understood that it was the power of the word. It was the power of storytelling that could do that. For a just a dreadfully fearful child to have the cardinal fear lifted by a story was magic. And from that moment on, I knew I was going to be a great reader, and I wanted to be a writer. So, but it was a process, of course. I remember the first adult novel that I read came from my mother. I was coming upstairs. I think I must have been about 10 or 11 years of age, and she had just finished an Agatha Christie. And she looked at me. I'll never forget, she looked at me, and she had the book in her hand, and that pause, and then she said, I think you might enjoy reading this. And I took it, and I can still remember that it was still warm from her hands. And that became, for us, and our relationship wasn't always an easy one, but when we were on the verge of saying something that could never be unsaid, that we almost certainly did not mean, but were perhaps going to say, where our relationship was the most fraught, one or the other of us would always say, what are you reading? And that would be the white flag.
I guess it gives you the ability to kind of talk around a little bit, whatever difficult things.
It became the common ground, that's right.
Yeah. You mentioned the poet Auden earlier, and at the core of the Gamache novels are actually, in a big way, Auden comes up in some of it. In this poem, Herman Melville, you talked also earlier about his writing about Yeats. There's this couplet I want to read, which is, goodness existed, that was the new knowledge. His terror had to blow itself quite out to let him see it. What about that couplet really speaks to you?
I read that long before I became a writer, and it resonated with me. I spent a number of years, and I guess still am an alcoholic, but I'm in recovery and have been now for more than 30 years. And it wasn't courage that got me sober, it was desperation. Because I was afraid that I was going to kill myself. And in fact, I almost certainly would have had I not gotten sober. And that is a terror. That is a profound fear that you disliked yourself so much that you had to murder yourself. And then I got sober. And I discovered how wonderful life is and how great people are and that goodness existed. And my terror had to blow itself quite out to make clear what was always there. And I just didn't see it for all the darkness. And that's what I try to write about, the terror that exists inside each of us and what happens when you can get beyond it and when you can see goodness, that duality.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the great comforts in my life, is that the older I get, I hope the better writer I become, because I've just experienced more things. And the more screwed up I've been, the better writer I have become.
I suppose
more empathy.
It is all material, I suppose, at a certain point for a writer, whether it's personal challenges, whether it's things you've observed.
Certainly has been for me. I think, and I'm sure you've run into writers who are very young, younger than you are, who are capable of writing works of genius. I was not. I could not. I had to be hurt into poetry. I had to be hurt into writing these novels. But there are many, many writers, thank God, who don't have to go through that.
There's that great faculty of imagination and sometimes deep research. Like, I've known writers that write, for instance, historical fiction about periods they haven't lived through. And then there's other writers who really, they do need to write from something that they've experienced. And it's so clear the inspiration that you draw from your own Eastern townships and how much you love the real life place that inspires the fictional Three Pines. As proud Nova Scotian, one of my top favorite things to do is tell people they need to go to Cape Breton Highlands, like right now, and to talk about why. So I want to give you that opportunity to speak about a place that's special to you and what you find there as a home, especially given you've moved around.
It's ineffable. It really is. Michael and I just decided that we needed to set up a house, a home where neither of us had lived. We got together a little later. He was older than I was. So we needed to set up a house together that we would be able to create a life in a community neither of us had lived in before. So we looked around. It could have been the Laurentians. It could have been anywhere, actually. So we chose to try the Eastern Townships, and it was a fit from day one. And a lot of our friends in Montreal said, "Oh, it'll never take. You won't be country people. You'll be back in a year or so." And that simply wasn't the case. And it's a magical thing. Seriously, as someone who has searched for home for most of my adult life, to feel like they saved a place at the table for us was powerful. And that's really what I write about. I write about about crimes, but really I write about home. I write about belonging. I write about our yearning for community and how powerful that is. And I write about it because it's what I found. And it's a love letter to Canada. It's a love letter to Quebec. It's a love letter to the Eastern Townships and to the community I've found.
Well, I mean, it's really wonderful hearing you talk about how you found community in the Eastern Townships. And then, of course, now you're part of building that community as well and really putting, like, Knowlton specifically on the map. You've opened a real cafe in your town inspired by the bistro in your novels.
I have.
That's like this actual place that people can go to and congregate and find that community experience. Yeah. What has it been like seeing your community members and seeing also readers who travel to the townships get to walk into this place that, as you say, is almost like something out of the imagination?
It's the most amazing experience to stand in my imagination, something I created 20 years ago, never thinking that that it would be realized. It's under the bookstore because of your generosity and your support of the books over the years. I was and still am in the financial position that I never thought I would be in when the building that the bookstore is in came up for sale. And not the bookstore itself, but the building. It's right in the middle of the village, and I was worried that if anyone bought it, anyone else, they might want to get rid of the bookstore and turn it into something else, which would be their right. But I didn't want to run that risk, so I was in the position to be able to buy the building. And then under Danny and Lucy's bookstore, Brome Lake Books, there was an empty floor, which was just an office building. It was pretty dreary, but it was full height, and you walk out and there's the river right there, and it was absolutely, I could see the potential. So I said, you know what, let's create a cafe, a bistro. This was a little like, some of you here might remember the Mickey Rooney films where he says, you know, let's put on a play.
Let's put on a show.
Yeah.
And we're going to save the town.
We're going to save the town. That's it.
Yeah.
We'll put on a show.
I've watched enough Turner Classic Movies in my life to know a Mickey Rooney film.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we can use Uncle Ned's barn, and Mum can do the costumes.
And Judy Garland's here, and it's going to be great. Yeah.
So it was a la that.
Yeah.
Let's open a bistro, and Mum can do the costumes. But it's so much easier said than actually, as it turned out, done. So but it was so much fun because it was an empty slate. So I created the two, or caused to be created, the fireplaces, fieldstone fireplaces on either end, and sofas and bookcases. And I want people who walk into it to feel not only that you're entering the books, you're entering the bistro, you're entering that entire safe harbor and environment, but that you are among friends, and I see that. I get to go there, and I get to have that sense of belonging, of meeting readers. 3/4 of the people who come there are readers, and they're sitting with perfect strangers, except you already have something in common. And so you end up talking about where you're from, have you read the books, who's your favorite character, or some people haven't read the books, and so they talk about that as well, and they're not, of course, served.
We have, don't let the door hit you on the way out.
Exactly.
Go upstairs to the bookstore and learn.
Exactly.
There'll be a quiz
one
before you're allowed back in.
Yeah. Actually, maybe we should just charge them triple.
Yeah, again, you've built this community. Obviously, there's the physical community space that we're talking about with the cafe. But you've built, obviously, a massive community of readers around the world, many of whom are in the room here tonight, have come from far and wide or down the road, I don't know, whatever, to come and be part of this evening with us. We're, I think, both so grateful for this experience that we're getting to share together. I'm curious for you, as somebody who's spent now 20 years meeting readers, seeing the growth of this community that's really emerged around your work, how does that feel for you as a writer, to just see that response?
Thank you for that question, Mattea. I think back to that time I was talking about at the beginning where nobody showed up. And when the first Still Life came out, and I had dreamt of this I was well into my 40s by then, and I had dreamt of it since the age of 8, so essentially 40 years, going on book tour. And I remember calling up the publisher when Still Life was about 3 weeks away from coming out, and I said that I'm ready for the tour. And he said, "Who is this?" I said, he said, "Well, we're not going to send you on tour because nobody knows who you are." And I said, "That doesn't sound right."
So how are they supposed to find out if I don't go on tour?
Yes, and it's me. Of course, people are going to want to come and see me. So Michael and I used the entire advance to have a lunch at McDonald's and plan the tour. And we went everywhere that anyone who would have us, any bookstore that would have us, and turns out the publisher was right. Nobody came. So to go from that to this, to be here in Massey Hall with all of you, and with you and to be recording this show for Bookends, a great CBC program. I'm speechless. It's incredibly emotional.
Louise, thank you so much for your work, for creating this wonderful world of Three Pines, for this new novel, The Black Wolf, and for sharing so openly so many stories with us tonight. Everyone applause for Louise.
Thank you.
And
thank you.
One more round of applause for Louise Penny. Have a fantastic night, everyone.
Mattea Roach. Thank you.